Well, I wish I had gotten to this yesterday or earlier today. Um, Yesterday, the last couple days have been good days in the sense that I feel like I've done some positive things. Yes, I'm still completely fucking addicted to this stupid game that I don't even like. And it is still eating up way more time than it possibly should. But outside of that, I've gotten a little bit of yard work done. I did some cleaning, you know. It's something that I don't like usually do. My wife would take care of. She would keep the basement area clean, mainly where she lived. um, but she would also keep the kitchen relatively clean as well. And it was funny. She'd come up, not to do any kind of particular cleaning or anything, but she'd come up to make her lunch, and every day when she'd make her lunch, she'd do some dishes and wash the counter and stuff like that. Just sort of this frantic, keep things under control type of attitude towards everything, which, like, I sort of emulated a little bit of that yesterday. Not yesterday, maybe the day before. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But I've gotten some applications in. I got myself set up on unemployment so that at least for a little while I'll be getting some sort of income while I keep trying to look for work. And probably slowly, it's something that's, being on unemployment is going to make it more likely that I find work, because it's very, very easy to just say, screw it, There's no real reason for me not to say that, but I think for my mental health, it's probably better for me to be working if I can, as well as, if things, if the eternal optimist, if the magical thinker in me ever gets their way, having some money would be useful, like excess money. But, the reality is I will live this life as a pauper, whether I'm working or not, and it just, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm not an absolute pauper because I have this house now and whatnot. But before, and still, I live so far below my means has been. That's why I'm probably able to just retire if I wanted to. But at the, I made the, I don't know, not mistake, grown-up adult choice to stop drowning in my game and not come up here and do my video, but to check my email first. Not first thing in the morning, obviously, because, the game eats the first 4 hours of my day or whatever right now. I hate the thing. I really do. But I can't break out of it somehow. Anyway, so I check my email after eating lunch and whatnot, or actually while I'm making lunch. And there's just a pile of shit I have to deal with. And it just threw me into this poop. To the point where I can't even play the video game now. Like, the video game, hiding in that was my way of avoiding everything. The mental anguish, and this is nothing terrible, It's not like my dad is sick or something that would really, really be bad. It's shit like one of my old work 401k is like, We've been trying to get a hold of you on the phone number that you forced me to put there because I don't have a phone. Presumably. We've been trying to get a hold of you all this time, but it hasn't been working. I need to talk to you about, and I'm like, I'm in no condition to talk to anybody about anything. Send me the information, But it's like, I don't know what the fuck they need. Is this an advertising pull? Is this just them telling me, yes, I can roll my account into something else? Which I already know. They've told me that via mail. And, that's a lot of fucking effort. I did that once with a UBS account I had too many... I thought I had too many retirement accounts at that point. And I rolled, what was this tiny little one that was really not making me any money because the service fees were so high. I got that dumped into my Vanguard account. But, I've got one from where I worked before that's sitting around. I've got like 5 or 6 different retirement accounts kicking around. They're going to be a bitch to figure out how to integrate at some point or another, but there's no reason to do it now. When I'm thinking about withdrawing from them or whatever, I'll try to figure out how to get them in one easy to cope with place rather than all over the place, I guess. But or is this some kind of fucking emergency, right? Is this something that they really absolutely need me to deal with? Like there's been some kind of security issue or something that, they need my okay on or something. I don't know. But I cannot deal with another fucking phone call and another operation dealing with people. I've had too much of that in the past month or two. That's not like my pattern. Work related, I would get on the phone a couple of times a week easily, right? But, well, not really the phone, but over Skype or whatever. But having to do all this shit with the interviewing and everything, I'm just, and then getting on unemployment, I'm just in no condition to cope with this shit. In addition, one of the good things that I did was I sent an online thing to get more copies of my wife's death certificate because the court ate one of them, and I sent one of them off to her father, and I asked if I could get that back, but he didn't respond. I need it to pursue a course that he suggested in terms of trying to get some of the money out of Portugal that she has, or had. And I'm not really sure whether I can even use it without, his advice or whatever. I mean, it's such a complicated situation, and it's not all that much money it's a reasonable amount, but it's an amount that most of it might get eaten up in legal fees if I have to rely on lawyers too much for it. I'm guessing, I don't know. Anyway. And then I just wish she'd moved it all into her bank here. But instead of just enough that it ended up costing me more because, like, if she had had $1,000 less than she did, my probate fees and whatnot would have been like $6,000 less. Great. And if I had understood that correctly, I could have actually taken all the money out of her account using her PayPal account, which I did have access to. And just, I transferred money from her PayPal to my account. I could have transferred it from her bank to my account. and just avoided all this shit completely. Doing that at exceedingly high levels, like pulling the whole amount out over time, that might have gotten me in some legal trouble. But pulling enough out just to get her balance down below, that would have been cool. But unfortunately, I had already informed the bank of her death by the time that I checked with my lawyer with the legal situation and realized that, wow, I'm just like $1,000. Her account was $1,000 over the limit, and if it wasn't in cash, if it was like property or something, it would be no big deal at all. But because it was cash, it's like, yeah, property, the amounts go way up. But in cash, you can't have that much lying around without it becoming a contract. Maybe I had to get my cash out of my cash if I'm planning on dying soon. But yeah. Anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about was on my trip yesterday. I went out of the house. There was something I needed to get. Oh, one more fun thing that came. This is just silliness. My prior employment sent me, after they laid me off, sent me an advertisement to get a personal loan. I would consider that predatory. The truth of the matter is there's no connection to that. They have, I have some banking business with them. They do their sales and everything. But this is one of the things that I say that, like, it's a clear example of how corporate entities and organizations are, and there's many, are essentially not rational. They're designed in a way that a non-functional, like a psychotic person would be designed, where, I don't know the term, but where they might, be doing something on one part of their brain and another part's doing something completely different, and there's no communication between them. And that's why the whole idea of like corporations being people too, or at least having certain rights that people have, like free speech and unlimited contributions through when you're looking at things like that, it's like, no, that's not fair. That's really not reasonable. You might convince me that a private organization would, but so here's the thing: like, if this was a local little business, unless this was just a flyer they were sending out to everyone on their contact list, if they were looking at it and saying, they would consider what they know, before reaching out and whatever. There might be, there's that personal touch and whatever, but you can't treat these organizations in any sense of the word as if they're sane and rational people. And we don't, right? So, what was it? The BP spill? No, not the BP spill. I'm trying to remember who was responsible, but the chemical spill way back in Bhopal, India, which is why I get BP in there, that killed thousands of people, and gross negligence across the board, right? Some individuals on the scene may have been held criminally responsible. But the question is, how do you hold this organization criminally responsible? And the answer is you don't. You fine them. It's like if someone was recklessly driving drunk in a car and they kill someone, instead of going to jail for manslaughter or whatever, no, we'll just give you a fine. And hey, it was a person in India you killed, so the fine is going to be not very much, comparatively. It's just, to me, it's just ridiculous. There ought to be, if you're going to allow corporate entities to have the kind of power that they do in our world, you have to have some kind of equivalent enforcement mechanism to correct and disincentivize what is horrific behavior. And many corporations deal in horrific behavior. They also have so much capital available that if you do try to sue them in a civil court, you're facing, horrible resources. They would, just like big tobacco and whatever, they don't want to lose. So they will invest huge amounts of money to not losing a case, because that would set a precedent, whatever, and they'd have, real problems afterwards. But it means that you can't get any redress at all, basically. Anyhow. I was, one of the positive things I was doing is, and this is after a couple of weeks hiatus, I've been trying to organize my magazine games. I have a file cabinet, they're in folders, but I have like one folder per era. And I decided that's just getting horrible, even with the smaller eras. Games are getting damaged because I reach in and I don't grab everything out of the folder. I'm trying to find the one game in that folder that's the one I want. And also, I can't store the counters in the folders. And something that I had up here, which was little boxes filled with the counters, as my magazine game collection has grown quite a bit, actually. I don't know what it used to be, but I mean, at one point it fit in one little box, and it ended up fitting in three now. Well, not fitting in three, overflowing. And it's just too hard to keep track of and find all my labeled baggies in these boxes, because they're too crammed tight, and I don't know where the distinguishment between one box and another is necessarily. It was all sorted by era. So I went to Target, all kind of interesting stuff about that, to get myself a bunch of these. Now, my first reaction was, I need some, let me order them online. I look online, Target has, $5 for a pack of 20, which I'm like, well, that's not bad. It seems a little expensive now when I'm thinking about it, a quarter per, but these are not just a manila envelope. They have a little wire hanger in them. They come with little tabbers, and I have a bunch like this already, because I bought a box of them, and then I found a box of them somewhere. But I don't have enough. So I bought, I wanted to order these, but if I wanted to order them online, I would have to make a purchase of at least $35. Maybe there's something else I could find at Target. And there would be a shipping fee, and it came out, I don't know, it was at least $15. And it was coming out to be more expensive to buy a box of these from Target than to go out and buy to get them online, from another organization. But the other organizations were significantly more expensive, like 3 times the price, like $16 or so for a thing of 20. And I'm like, well, that's stupid. Now, the decision I made was to walk to Target. Now, I played my video game throughout the morning. I was supposed to get up in the morning and go, but I had too many points in my video game, so I played it, and it was like noon before I made it out the door, and it was 90 degrees. If I had gone in the morning, it would have been fine. Well, it wasn't 90 yet, but it gets hot late here, late in the day. Um, I'm used to it getting. I'm used to the peak heat being around 1 or 2. Here it's actually around 4 or 5, which just is odd to me. So it was like actually kind of temperate on the way there, but it was sweltering on the way back. Found out a couple of things. One, Springfield, well, now all of Oregon charges, requires that they charge for bags if you want to buy bags, if you want a bag when you go to the store. One of the big advantages of me going to Springfield instead of, there's another Target in Eugene that's about the same distance away. I don't know which one's a better walk. They both have their pluses and minuses. But one of the big advantages was that I don't have to pay for bags. And, okay, they're 5 cents each. It's not something that I should be making a decision off of, but I gotta tell you, psychologically, that's a big issue for me. Let me swap batteries. It may actually be worse than that because plastic bags are banned in Eugene. But I think these heavy duty ones that Target uses are allowable. I'm not sure. Maybe they have to give you crappy paper ones. Not normal paper, I'm sure. But one of the things is, I don't mind so much paying 5 cents for a bag this solid. It's actually a really good bag. You could use it, as well as a cloth tote almost. Anyway, and they're obviously high quality material, etc. That's put into the plastic form. You can carry your shit a long way in them. They never rip. Well, I mean, I'm sure they do eventually, but I've never had a problem with them. And it's one of the things I actually really like about Target is they give you really good bags for a place that's kind of a cheap place, right? I don't know. I mean, I put it in the same category as things like Walmart and everything, but some people seem to think Target is like the higher end of that. I don't know. I mean, for me to go there, it can't be. It's got higher end stuff, like not really fancy, but it's got like stuff that's not absolute shit. It's got some stuff that, I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's kind of expensive for what it is, kind of fancy looking, whatever, like chrome waste baskets and stuff like that. But then they just have a lot of stuff that's just nicely utilitarian, and usually pretty good prices. So, I tend to go there. It's also just more convenient. I'm sure I would go to a Walmart over a Target if they were more effective for me, but that has never been the case in my life. I've been to Walmart a couple of times. I don't know. Seems fine, Another nice thing about Targets is they're, I think, all laid out exactly the same. Like, the one I walked into here, I haven't tried the other one the one in Eugene for anything serious. That's kind of weird that I haven't, because I know I bought lamps. Oh, no, that's not a Target. That's a, no, that's something else. I can't remember what the name is. It's a place I used to go. But they didn't have any lamps, but Target, of course, did. Of the type that I wanted, which are these cheap assemble, or something, fans, I don't know what it was. I think it was a lamp. Anyway, this was a long time ago. I walked into the Target here, which I go to, maybe once or twice a year at most, or less. Maybe once every 2 years, I don't know. And it looked exactly like the one in Phoenix. I mean, I knew which direction I had to go from the entryway to find what I needed to find. I don't know how many places do that. Supermarkets kind of do, but then they don't all. They throw in a curve. It's like, well, which side of the store is the dairy on? Which side is the bread on? Or, but there's a certain similarity to them. But I mean, this felt like I was walking into exactly the same store. Anyhow, all that's fine and interesting. But the thing that really struck me as weird, I've never been, I've been to this Target several times, and it's located in what was a kind of largish mall. But it's kind of off to the side of the mall, right? You know, a big box tends not to be right on the mall. Big indoor mall. And, you know, I'm not a mall person. I never have been. But it looked, I was kind of curious, hey, what stores are still around, you know? And there were external stores sited around the parking lot as well. So it being 90 degrees by this point, and me now carrying bags, you know, three of these boxes in bags, which is kind of a weight, and already chafing a little bit probably, I decided it would be interesting to walk around the mall and see what I could see. Now, I hadn't really decided the extent to which I was going to do this. It got much larger than I thought. First of all, I didn't realize how big a mall it was. But secondly, you know, I was just thinking I would walk by the first few stores. I didn't really realize it was an indoor mall. It looked like a big strip mall, just in terms of how things were appropriated outside and whatnot. Like, I expect these big malls to have, I don't know, all kinds of stuff that advertises what they are, or some kind of symbology around them. So, for example, there's another mall that I used to live near when I lived across the river in Phoenix. These are both across the river, but one's in Springfield. The Valley River Center. And yeah, I mean, at least whenever I come close to that, I know it's a mall. This thing, it wasn't obvious, but it had to do with the angle I hit it from and whatnot. You didn't see the size and length of what it was. Anyhow, I start walking around it, and I'm shocked by, you know, some of the stuff that I see. The stores, some of them don't look like they should be in kind of, I don't know, what I'd call more of a Galleria type mall in terms of size. It's not, so they made some real super malls. It's interesting, the whole history of malls that I remember at least. But they, at one point or another, made some, you know, it's sort of, the concept is weird because at one point there was this, well, wouldn't it be nice to kind of approximate the village and town center with all the shopping available there in an indoor experience that's accessible to suburban people. That's kind of the idea behind a mall. You know, and strip malls were probably the first thing to start trying to do some of this. But the idea of some place where you could actually wander around and browse a little bit was there. The bigger malls didn't really come, like, well, so I'm jumping ahead in my line of thought because one of the things that led me along this spur was thinking about how long ago my youth was and how long from that era to my dad's youth in that time, and, you know, what we're kind of looking at in terms of the differences in society. Because here's the thing, the mall was dead. I've seen dead malls before. They tended to be the little ones that came out in the 70s, and then they got beaten up by the bigger malls, the Galleria styles, the giant ones. So there was kind of this whole process of bigger is better when it came to creating this kind of situation. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure, there's a certain aspect of, well, you want to make sure that there's a couple of stores for everybody in the family or whatever. But by dead, I mean, so when I walked into smaller malls that had died, and we're talking maybe in the late 80s, early 90s, there'd be the movie theater there would have become $1.25 or $1.50 movies, late in their run, not in great shape anymore, whatever, but significantly cheaper than you would pay for going into the prime theaters. There was like I'm remembering one in particular in Buffalo. There was like a furniture rental store in there. This is not the kind of thing that belonged in a mall. And then there'd be old people pacing back and forth, getting their daily walks in air conditioning and whatnot. But it was still, the mall. There were a lot of stores shut. There really wasn't much of anything in there. Oh, I know what the place is that I confused with Target. TJ Maxx. I got some good deals there once upon a time, but the one I went into here didn't look like what I remembered. Anyway, there was this sort of attitude of, okay, well, we still have this building and we can use it for some much, much lower rent customers. Well, that's not what happened here. If you have big storefronts that have exterior facing, those still got taken up, but the interior mall is just shut down. There were two little slices. Honestly, not very big. One of them was tiny. It was basically the size of my house floor plan, right? With stores off of that. Air conditioned, which is nice. One of the stores in it was a nail salon. Okay, so the used furniture place was one thing. I can't even imagine a nail salon. Just purely interior, and you could smell the acetate, I don't remember which, in the air coming from that. Normally these things are in little places, in strip malls or on streets or whatever, where they're visible and where, I don't know, there's a certain kind of neighborhood where they just pop up for the most part. But I just found this really, really weird. And it wasn't like at all a normal nail salon. I have a certain view of what a nail salon looks like because of the ones I walk by on the streets. And that may have something to do with the kinds of streets that I saw them on. But yeah, I think this was kind of more of a high-end nail salon. And instead of like women working there were what looked like gay guys doing the job. I don't know. I never saw anything like it before, and neon lights and everything, just really, really weird situation. But I think they shouldn't be allowed to be sharing the airspace because that shit is not good for people. You shouldn't be able to work or deal with that stuff, but that's a different matter. Yeah, and there were there was a little bit larger area that had a movie theater, 2 jewelry stores, and I think that's it. Everything else was shut. But the big thing is they like walled off the sections of the mall, the main portion of the concourse of the mall, and this was just astounding to me. I don't. I know that malls have been suffering since the online era, but and I'm assuming the pandemic made things so much worse. So I don't know what shape the Valley River Center's in, which was the one I used to be near, which is still a fucking big mall, like compared to the ones I grew up with, and that's what I want to get to on this. It wasn't the whole point. The whole point was some reason for me to chatter, because I'm not playing games anymore. But when I was last there, it was sort of lively. I mean, nothing like the era that I'm used to, the era of the mall, right? And so that's what I was looking at. I looked at, well, it's like, oh yeah, and there were other things like Hobby Lobby. One of the bigger stores there had turned into a Hobby Lobby. Again, not the kind of thing you expected there. A lot of things that you expect to see in standalone buildings that didn't get an advantage previously, because one of the big deals about a mall is you're attached to the concourse. And it used to be the big anchor stores wanted to be there for some reason. They had their own entrances. They made a big deal, they made it very, very easy to get there externally and not deal with the rest of the mall, but they also wanted that traffic from the mall as well. And it was they were the ones who, I don't know, you wouldn't go to the mall because you really like Tofu Hut or whatever. But all the other stuff that was there kind of fed off of these one way or another. And presumably those bigger stores got some kind of advantage by not being standalones like they were in the department store era. So anyway, I started thinking about, with how dead it was, I'm like, oh man, I feel like, some real old timer, which I guess I am getting there, reminiscing about the ghost town that that they're around, or more likely, looking at my youth or whatever, someone who was looking at, what had been kind of a sleepy town that I grew up in and had turned into almost a suburb, even though it's, quite a ways from any city, which just felt weird to me. Like, all of northern New Jersey is that way, and now it's creeping north of New Jersey into New York more and more. Well, it did that during my time down there. So I'm kind of like, well, that's kind of interesting, but I felt much, much older than I actually am when I started thinking about, well, back in my day, these malls were a big thing. And they never really were for me, but they were always super crowded. But I can remember, like, when I was in Phoenix, there's a huge mall there, a really big one, actually in Scottsdale, that, was booming every bit as much. It didn't feel like the mall that I grew up, in my era, where all the kids used to hang out. But it was booming. It was filled with people and everything. And we're talking, I don't know, as late as like 2012, 2013 easily. It was a destination spot, and I get the feeling this place was sort of like that from things I remember people talking about. So it must have died relatively recently, but I mean, we're not just talking about sparsely populated or whatever. We're talking about there is no concourse. There's two little places where you can go inside and see stores. And out of a huge, huge fucking place. Anyway, I ended up walking around the whole thing in the heat and whatever, and then heading back home. Um, but the thing I was thinking about was that if we look back to the era that I'm, you know, kind of familiar with in terms of what malls were like and everything, we're looking 40 years. So then I say, well, okay. "40 years before that, there weren't malls." You know, I mean, we're talking like 1940 or so. And then I kind of positioned it more for, well, let's look at, my age now, my dad's age at a given time. That pushes it a little bit further to say, call it 85, 87, somewhere in there. And then we're only talking 30 years, 35 years, whatever. And so we're looking at the mid-50s. And still, there really aren't malls. You're in an age of department stores. And the malls kind of started off, first of all, there were the strip malls. And I think those were already showing up in the 50s. But that whole idea of like, let's conglomerate all these stores around a concourse and that, I think that started, right around 1970 era. I know that when we came back from Venezuela, we had a mall in about 25 minutes from where I lived, drive. And, it was a big deal. Every few weeks we would go there. And that would be kind of a family outing type of thing to go there. And I wouldn't be interested most of the times because I don't want to buy clothes. I don't, there was very little in a mall that interested me. There's I can't remember the novelty shop. That was kind of cool. There was a magic shop across the street from it that I would usually, if I was going to go, it would be like, oh, let's go to the magic shop. But then when I got into gaming, at some point, after I got into gaming, the first place I found that sold anything was the Highway Hobby House, which was this place down near where my dad worked. And it was basically a trains and models type place, a big box store when big box stores didn't really exist. And it had, it wasn't really a big box. It was a converted office, is what it really was. But I don't know how I found out that they had stuff. But that's where I actually found my first role-playing game. Maybe somebody told my dad at his work, but they had a small section of Avalon Hill games. And I'd asked them about SPI, and they're like, no, we can't carry that. Our distributor won't give us that. So that's when I first started buying Avalon Hill games. And just some interesting stories about that. But it's also the first place where I saw D&D. And, when I was asking about the SPI games and when I was kind of not sure about what Avalon Hill games to get, they always looked, I don't know, less less intellectual or something. And they sold me. I'm trying to remember if that is indeed the place. Anyway, somewhere I bought the basic set, and I think it was there, and I got talked into it. So I know it was there, and then that's eventually where the hardcover AD&D stuff started showing up, and so I was buying it there. I didn't know anywhere else. Well, one day at the mall, I looked in a toy store for no real good reason. And they had basically an aisle of war games, role-playing games. I had no idea, It was the only place that I knew of that was actually kind of close to me. So that became okay, every time that like anybody went to the mall, I would go along because I'd want to see, hey, is there something new in there? Oh, can I spend some money? And again, no SPI games. They had Avalon Hill, but they had other stuff as well. They had GDW. I ended up getting into Traveller there. They had RuneQuest. I don't know. I don't think they had a lot of Chaosium stuff. Like I don't remember seeing the things like Nomad Gods and stuff. But maybe I wouldn't have gotten them. I don't know. What they had Iron Crown Enterprises stuff. I got into Rollmaster through them, and also, did I pick up any? I didn't pick up any of their board games. So this is the thing. I might have been snobbish about, and also frugal. I mean, I had to be very careful with my money because I only had enough. Like, I officially had an allowance for chores, but I was almost never getting it because I'm a lazy bastard. So most of my money at that point, at least at the earlier stage, was from playing poker. Although I did have a job, a couple of different jobs. Once I was like 14 or so. Where, I was bringing in more money, but I just was never good at getting my allowance. It was like, I'd have to do things like empty the dishwasher and keep my room clean. I think I could have done the dishwasher, but keeping my room clean is just impossible. I mean, it's impossible. And the funny thing is, in my mom's later years, like, I don't know how old, but once everybody moved away and whatever, she just became every bit the slob that I am. And that makes me kind of happy because I understand where I get it from or whatever. Anyway, the meandering that I had about the time issue is just how much time and how much things have changed in time. But it's not just, I look back and say, wow, things sure changed a lot on this particular instance. But there's a lot of life that's just seems very much the same, it's just kind of weird that way. And a lot of the changes are gradual, so you don't notice them. But then you think back and you're like, huh, that's interesting. Things sure were different then. But it is, in many ways, as different a world, when I look back that, 1980 to 2020 or whatever, as 1940 to 1980. People talk about, hey, technology is accelerating and whatnot. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, there were some pretty big fucking changes in that period. Technology is accelerating over a larger scale. There's no question of that. But it feels to me that, if we look at each generation or more, from the 20th century on, I don't know how much we're seeing an acceleration in change. Uh, you know, I mean, I look at the cars on the street now and they look like the cars on the street in 1990 in a lot of ways. There's a lot of similarities there. If I looked at the cars on the street in 1950 and compared that to 1930, wow, there's a big difference. Oh. And there's a big difference from 1950 to 1970. But, you know, there's sort of a stagnation that's occurred. Airplanes seem like the same damn shit. I know they've got a lot more electronics in them and everything. But, you know, then there's things like the cell phone, which just is completely a weirdness to me. The problem I have with it is it seems so inferior to what you'd want to have to be able to access the internet or whatever. And they're fairly expensive, and I see people using them so much. And, you know, I mean, look, the idea of an actual just cell phone makes sense. It's the smartphone, the whole computer being in it and whatever. The old flip phones had a computer in them too, and you could do stuff on them, but you couldn't browse the web in the same way, whatever. But it just seems like such an inferior way to do that. It's so hard for me to understand. I can understand some of the utility functions to this. For example, you need to pull up a map of where you are, you know, or just having a phone. But that, again, that did not require the full cell phone experience. But the idea of people browsing websites and looking at stuff, trying to read things, I mean, it boggles my mind. Now, there are some technologies, I guess, some sorts of websites that, you know, wouldn't exist without the cell phone. So like TikTok. To me, TikTok's whole purpose is to provide the kind of entertainment that's appropriate for such an inferior, you know, tool. Anyway, I'm wandering way away and off into the wild. But it is making me happier to be able to talk, to feel like I'm having a conversation, even though it's only a monologue. And I don't know, maybe I'll be able to cope with things a little bit better today. But Jesus, it's just I got so slammed by just, hey, I'm finally starting to do things, and then the reason that you don't do things, because when you do things, it causes other things to need to be done. You know, if you just hide from the fucking world, yeah, eventually everything goes to shit, but you got a long time you can hide if that's your strategy. And, you know, for me, it's the real problem is, hey, do I really need to do these kind of maintenance and normal life type activities? Or am I going to be dead within the next couple of years? Because if I'm going to die within like 5 years, I can probably stretch things out so that I don't have to do a damn thing, you know, a couple of things. But I got my sink fixed, you know. Everything else, fuck it. Yeah. It's kind of weird for me to leave the house on a completely sort of discretionary task. Like, I did not need to get these things. And because I've got other folders that I'm using and whatnot, but these just, I'm like, screw it, I want to do this right. Why? I don't know. It probably doesn't matter if I'm only going to live 5 years. The real scary part, though, is, you know, what the hell, I might end up living a long time. There's doesn't seem to be. I have no great magical hopes right now that I'm gonna die. Like, the hints of cancer or whatever aren't really that convincing. And I've had my third nipple for a long time. So, all right, I'll send this up.